Well, just very quickly, I was pleased with the way our team went out, and we wanted to play Alabama football on Saturday. I think we did that. I was pleased with that. We had some players that had outstanding performance: Drew Davis, Julio Jones, Trent Richardson, who was honorable mention for the conference, and Rolando McClain and Javier Arenas, who was player of the week in the conference, and Robert Lester did a good job on special teams, and Lee Tiffin. But we need to move on quickly. I think the most important thing, in a short week is efficiency in what we do and how we try to get prepared. And I think our entire staff and our players are, very aware of that. This is one of the best rivalry games in football. Two great schools in the state that have had opportunity to play for 100 years now, and we have a tremendous amount of respect for their team, what they've done. They've made a tremendous amount of improvement this year, and there's nothing really outside of this game that matters this week. You can throw out records, rankings, awards. Nothing else really matters. This is kind of a state championship game, so to speak, and I think, it's always a great football game, and as I said before, we have a tremendous amount of respect for their team and what they've accomplished. Offensively, this year they have one of the best offensive teams in the conference. I think they're second in most categories, highly ranked in a lot of categories nationally. I think they're playing well on defense. Their ability to run the ball is probably, they're the best running football team we've played all year. Ben Tate is an outstanding runner, and they do a great job of utilizing their personnel, playing different personnel groups and all that, type of stuff, which, is always a little bit of an issue to prepare for. But a lot of the stuff we've played against before, and got to do a good job, as I said, efficiency-wise, getting our players ready for what they're going to see. Defensively, I think they play hard. They play with toughness. I think they've improved, tremendously on defense, especially in the back end and how they play. And their front seven is physical and playing very well. So, this is a really good team, and we have a tremendous amount of respect for them in every phase of the game, including special teams.
Jordan-Hare Stadium's the only stadium in the SEC you haven't won at yet. Is this your best team that you'll be taking there, and what makes it a tough venue?
What's happened in the past really doesn't, matter. It's what happens this week and what this team does, and they had some good teams and we had some good teams, and we played some great games there, and hopefully our team will be ready to play a great game this year, and I'm sure theirs will as well.
Coach, a lot of guys saw action on Saturday. I was just wondering if you would comment on Star Jackson.
Star did a nice job in the game. We had some sort of miscommunication. Some of the players that he was playing with didn't get lined up exactly right, and I think that caused some problems for him. But I thought he did a nice job, and I was really pleased with the way all of our players played that got an opportunity to play. I thought, the defensive guys that played in the second half did a pretty good job, and I thought offensively we moved the ball. We shot ourselves in the foot a couple times with some penalties and different things, but the execution overall was good, and I thought Star did a nice job.
Coach, Auburn's defense has struggled a lot in the red zone this season. In terms of maybe taking advantage of that, can you talk about where you feel like your offense sits in the red zone right now?
Well, I think that we've had our struggles at one point in time in the red zone this year. A lot of it self-inflicted in terms of whether it was a penalty or a fumbled snap or, things that the defense really didn't have anything to do with. And I think the key to it is, disciplined execution in terms of what we do and what we're doing. And that's going to give us the best chance to be successful regardless of who we're playing, and that's certainly what we're going to focus on.
Nick, when you took this job, you stood up there and said you were working to dominate the other team in the state 365 days a year. Was last year's game, the way you guys controlled it, the physical nature of your team, is that what you were talking about?
Well, but last year is last year. So, and what happened last year really doesn't matter this year. So I think being physical in this game is an important part of the game. And I think it's an important part of every game. That's one of the things that we try to do as a team, to be physical, to play with great effort, and do a good job in execution and the discipline that we execute with. And I think that's going to be a real key in this game as well.
Coach, can you talk a little bit about the challenge of facing their offense, and in particular, making sure you get lined up, your substitutions, and also not getting outflanked?
Well, I think that's always critical, and I think that, the quick snap in college football now, where people just get up to the line and snap as soon as the guy uncovers, is something that defensive players have to be aware of, and it's critical that they get lined up, and it's something that we need to emphasize with our players. We need to do it in practice, and it's hard to simulate in practice. You got a scout team over there that needs to look at a card before they can run the play, so it's kind of hard to get it going, but they do a good job of that, and that's something that we need to do a good job of and make sure we're lined up so that we don't give up plays because we're not in the proper alignments.
Kind of a two-part question. First part, Rolando McClain, the game over there 2 years ago, he had 15 tackles, had the interception, really kind of blossomed into the star that he is right now. If you could just any recollections you have of that game, the way Rolando played, and also the second part, just the way the defensive line has developed beyond just Terrence Cody with the depth that y'all developed on the defensive line.
Well, Roe has made constant improvement as a player. We've had a lot of third down since that game, and I don't think you want me to talk about what I remember from the game, so I'd just rather move on and focus on what's ahead of us, not what's behind us. But Roe has done a really good job of improving, becoming a better leader, playing consistently. I mean, he is an outstanding player for us and has probably done as much for the defense in terms of his leadership and production as anybody on our team. The defensive line has sort of continued to develop. I mean, we have some older, experienced players there. We have some good young players that have played well for us this year, and some guys that have gotten opportunities that and done a good job with. So we're pleased with that. I think it's going to be important in this game. You got to fit blocks and play physical on the line of scrimmage, and this is a really good running team, and this is going to be a challenge for that group as well.
Coach, what is it specifically about their running attack that makes them the best that you'll see all season?
Well, I think, first of all, their offensive line, they've got 4 guys that have really played a lot of football and are all good players, and their offensive line is one of the strengths of their team. And I think Ben Tate, as I said before, is an outstanding running back. And I think the multiples of presentation that you get from formations and motions and personnel groups and those types of things to run the same plays basically for them. Sometimes they get the defensive players a little bit out of sorts, and I think that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we're lined up properly and can try to fit the runs and do the best job that we can to stop the runs. But they do a good job in the running game. They run power and counter and zone play and sweep, and got a lot of complementary reverses and misdirection plays and play passes off of that when you load the box all the time, they, eventually hit a play pass on you for a big play.
Coach Saban, it seems like in the last 2 games that Mississippi State and Chattanooga, the team's come a little closer to playing the way you've talked about all year in terms of efficiency and attitude and sort of getting out of the block early, and just wondered if that was the message this week, even though it obviously will be emotional in some ways.
Well, I think emotion's great, but I also think that controlled emotion, channeling in the right direction and doing the right things. I felt like we have played some games where we get emotional. This game included a couple years ago, and we make a lot of mental errors and we don't execute very well, and we sort of lose our focus and discipline. And I don't think that's the best way to have efficient performance. So I think that the emotion is great, but it's got to be channeled in the right direction. And I think it's important in games like this that, the players can focus on the things that they need to do to be successful and not get caught up in, what's going on around them. And I do feel that, in the last couple games we have, played a little more consistently, got off to a pretty good start. But, this is the only game that matters right now, that we, do a good job that way in this particular game.
Coach, you talked about Ben Tate a couple of times. When you look at the yards, he's one of the top backs in the SEC along with Mark Ingram. Do you see any similarities in their styles, Ingram and Tate?
Well, I don't really like to compare players. Both guys, are very good in their own right, and they've been very productive for their team, and both do what their team needs them to do to help their team be successful. But in terms of style, I'd rather not get into any comparisons. Ben Tate's a big, strong, fast guy that's hard to tackle, and he's got a great stiff arm when he gets out in the open field and all that kind of stuff. And they do a good job of utilizing what he does well, and he does a good job of executing for him. So it's going to be a real challenge for our defensive players.
Coach, if you could talk about the Wildcats and when their version as a quarterback running it, the aggressiveness, how much it affects how you defend the Wildcat when they have actually a quarterback running it.
Well, I think anytime they have a quarterback running it, it does affect, how you play it, because there is the potential of a guy being able to throw the ball. And I think sometimes when a quarterback's not playing, McFadden, threw it some. But I just think that it takes a lot of discipline and eye control, that no matter how you play it, everybody's got to key what they're supposed to key. And if you got a guy man-to-man, if you're playing in man-to-man, then you better watch him and look at him and cover him. And they did hit, Ole Miss for a touchdown pass, out of that, and because the guy wasn't looking at his man that had him man-to-man. So I think discipline, eye control is, there's a picture when we come out of the locker room, and it's got Bear Bryant's statue on it. And there's something about discipline, eye control on there that I read every time I walk out. And I think that's important in every part of football, but it's especially important in Wildcat.
I had a couple for you. One, I wanted to ask you about Colin Peak, and just, I know you were talking about how he's kind of back. I was just wondering how much the injury might have affected him, and if he's been producing at the same level.
Well, he's been very productive. I think the last two games, especially the last game, he seemed to be full speed. I know we only threw him the ball once, but that doesn't mean that he's not performing well. I thought he blocked well in the game, and we feel like he's, back to the Colin Peak of old.
And the second one is a little off football, but I know you were talking about trying to get the preparation in all on the front end. On the back end of the preparation, does it change any having the players and everything together Thursday night being a Thanksgiving as opposed to any other night or anything?
Well, it really can't be. I mean, I guess it is. It's like all the other things I talk about. It's an issue if it's an issue for you. So I know it's an issue for my wife sometimes that we don't have our traditions of Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that when we play these games and have practice and those types of things. And I have a radio show on Wednesday night when we're supposed to have Thanksgiving dinner. So, it affects her, but it can't affect me, and it can't affect the players. And, hopefully they can stay focused on what they need to be thinking about. Although I do think that when you have holidays that and we're going to give our players an opportunity on Wednesday night to have dinner with us, or if they live within a 2-hour radius, go home and have dinner with their family. And so, it's not that we ignore the holiday and don't understand the importance of family. I think it is important, and I trust our players that they will go do the right thing when it comes to that type of stuff, and stay focused on the game as well.
Coach, given the players you lost off that offensive line last year, what do you think has been the biggest key to being able to keep the performance pretty steady and actually run for a bit more yards this year?
Well, I think that the backs have done a really good job, but I think from an offensive line standpoint, we've had some guys step up, Vallejos and Barrett Jones, and Mike Johnson has played very well this year, and, to get junior college left tackle who has played really well for us this year and developed very quickly and has done a outstanding job. And Drew Davis is back from last year, so things just kind of fell into place, for that group, and the guys that had an opportunity took advantage of it, and they have done a really, really good job as a group. And I think Mike Johnson's leadership has, contributed to that sort of steady improvement.
And also I was going to ask about crowd noise, and there's been a lot of teams that have come into Tuscaloosa this year and have trouble with the crowd noise, making checks at the line, that sort of thing. How is your offense geared to handle that sort of thing, and what I would imagine would probably be the loudest you've seen this year?
Well, I'm sure it will be, and we played on the road before, and they had cowbells at Mississippi State, and you always have to deal with that when you play on the road, and we addressed that, on I guess Wednesday's practice this week, and practice and do the things that we have to do if we need to go on silent or whatever it is, but can't let it affect you. And the places that we played on the road this year, we've done a fairly good job of being able to execute and not getting affected by the noise.
Coach, is there any way to fully anticipate trick plays, gimmick plays, or does it all go back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of eye discipline?
Well, I think that a team like this who has a lot of those types of plays, you study, you research, you see what they've done in the past. You sort of have a history on what people have done against you, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and but I still think that it comes down to players responding and reacting to what they see on the field and looking at the right things and playing with discipline. And most of the time, when one of those plays work, it's usually because the deception of it got someone on defense not to do what they were supposed to do.